Good afternoon, my name is Stephanie Mina, and today I will be presenting my food and culture fact sheet on Colombian culture and cuisine. So I have four learning objectives for this afternoon. The first is to learn more about traditional foods and dishes in Colombian cuisine. The second is to learn more about traditional eating patterns in Colombian culture and to learn about traditional health beliefs currently in Colombian culture. And the last is to explore the differences between the food practices of individuals currently living in Colombia and individuals who have immigrated to the United States. So traditional foods that we might see in Colombia, these actually vary based on by region, but some of the most common types of foods that we'll see on a daily basis would be rice, maize, which is a form of corn, potato or cassava, which is a tuber plant, legumes, meat such as beef, chicken, pork, goat, seafood, and then tropical fruits. I just listed a few here. This picture up in the corner is actually dragon fruit. So dragon fruit, papaya, guava, blackberries, passion fruit. You might also see granadilla, soursop, and lolo are just a few other types of fruits that you might see that we don't typically see in the United States. I know for a fact that I've never actually eaten dragon fruit, although I would love to. And then some just traditional dishes that you might see on a daily basis in Colombia. So arepas is actually a pretty big staple in most foods. This is a type of cornbread or corn cake that is eaten along with other foods in the meal. Usually not by itself. Most people will tell you that it actually is a little like the consistency of cardboard, which is why they eat it with most other foods while so they might pile foods on top of it while they consume it. If it's eaten for breakfast, it's usually paired with some form of cheeses or chocolates. Then we also have patacones, which is an appetizer. It's fried green plantains. Ajiaco, this is a potato and corn soup. This is more popular in the Bogota and Andean region. And then we have arroz con coco, which is just one form of dessert that you might see in Colombia. They are big on desserts there. We also have our traditional dishes. So the national dish is bandeja paisa. This is made from red beans, egg, meat, arepas, rice, chorizo, which is pork sausage, pork skin, morcilla, which is black sausage with rice and pork blood, plantains, and avocados. There is a little picture over here in the corner of what this looks like. This dish comes from the cultures of Medellin and Bogota. These are the two largest cities in Colombia. Prior to the 1950s, it was pretty varied depending on the region that you might be in. It was actually created by the arrieros or muleteer. These are individuals that transport products from the mountains into the cities by mules. So they would eat this on a daily basis because they had a high physical activity job. In the 1950s in Bogota, it was actually started to be standardized within restaurants, and the version that we see today, this picture that I have here, is actually what can be found throughout Colombia. As I said, it's a very high calorie dish. It's around 2,000 calories, so it's usually saved for birthdays, some form of celebrations, or family meetings. It's not typically consumed on a daily basis. There is frijolada. This is a smaller version of bandeja paisa, which can be consumed on a normal, typical weekday. So then we have some traditional beverages that you might see. Chicha is a traditional alcoholic beverage that can be made from maize, grains, or fruit. It's very, very strong, and it was actually banned at one point, but was brought back. It is because of how strong the alcohol content is in this, it's usually saved as a celebratory drink that's consumed at weddings, birthdays, or community work occasions. Coffee. We've all heard of our Colombian coffee. So this is actually consumed consistently throughout the day with almost every single meal. And then we also have fresh fruit juices that are also consumed. They try to limit the intake of soda, and as well as they don't actually drink a lot of water in their culture. Just some traditional eating patterns. Multiple meals are consumed throughout the day, so it's usually about 3 with some snacks mixed in. They're usually consumed with coffee or some form of fruit juice. Meals are typically prepared by the women in the family. It's very much a cultural stereotype that the women are the ones who take care of the meal prepping. Meals will begin only once the host, or usually the male in the family, says buen provecho, which translates to enjoy your meal. Food is always passed around the table to the left, and when eating, everybody will keep their elbows below the table, wrists resting on the table with their hands above the table. So for breakfast, early morning breakfast consists of coffee, arepas, or bread and cheese immediately upon waking. So as soon as they wake up in the morning, they get some coffee and they get some food in them. Then around 9 a.m., kind of more of a snack time, individuals will have fruit, empanadas, a pastry, along with more coffee. So kind of not really a second breakfast, but just an extension of the breakfast, depending on what time they actually woke up in the day. And then our midday meal is actually the largest. It's actually referred to as corrientazo, which means from ordinary people. This is actually, corrientazo is like a cafeteria that you can go to. This consists usually of soup, rice, some form of protein, whether it's fish, pork, beef, whatever it might be, salad, and fruit. This is viewed as an opportunity every single day to socialize with friends and family and talk about daily life. They definitely avoid talking about work during this time. This usually lasts about 1 to 2 hours. This is the largest meal of the day that they will consume, so it's a very nutrition-focused meal. It's believed, because it's consumed in the middle of the day, that it can help prevent weight gain. And then, unlike in the United States, dinner is actually a very light meal. It usually consists of leftovers from lunch, some cereal with milk, or some form of cake. Cake and dessert type foods are very, very much always consumed after meals. They're very big on the sweets after food. This is typically eaten later in the day, around 7 o'clock. Throughout the day, snacks can be eaten. These usually consist of fresh fruit, sandwiches, or pastries. Less affluent individuals may actually skip lunch and eat a larger meal at the end of the day towards the typical dinner time. This is usually a more carbohydrate-rich meal, just because it's to help get them through to breakfast, as well as to get them through the rest of the day until dinner time again. So traditional health beliefs, physical activity is extremely important, and individuals should be physically active at some point every single day. This is usually following lunch. Most individuals, especially construction workers, will actually play a game of soccer. They'll go ride a bike. They might go to the gym if they're a little bit more affluent and they can afford to go there, but they make sure they get some form of physical activity in on a daily basis. And then we have Chiefline. This is actually an old wives' tale told by mothers to get them to come home earlier in the day. This is actually a cold wind that can make you ill with flu-like symptoms if you're out on the streets past 6 p.m. So, good way to get kids to come home. And then we have Tayeta. These are actually shamans or healers. They prepare a drink called yage. This is a drink or medicine that is believed to help people understand their purpose and to have a spiritual awakening, just so that they can have a better life. So some current food practices in Colombia versus practices in the United States. So some similarities: in Colombia and in the United States, individuals consume 3 meals per day. It's the difference in the size of the meal that makes any changes. So in Colombia, the largest meal of the day is lunch, but in the United States, our largest meal of the day is dinner. So that's a big difference. Most individuals who are living in Colombia will continue to follow that. The largest meal of the day would be the corrientazo meal, but in the United States, most of them will follow that dinner is the largest meal, simply because of the way our work schedules go. We typically don't end our day immediately after lunch. We continue on, and the end of our day isn't usually until around 5, 6 o'clock anyway. In Colombia, foods are purchased fresh each day instead of a large group at the start of the week. So on a daily basis, mothers and the women of the household will go to the market and they'll purchase fresh fruit, fresh meats, fresh vegetables on a daily basis for whatever foods that they are making for that day. Whereas in the US, we will go to the grocery store maybe once a week, maybe twice a month, and we will purchase enough food to last us for an entire week, or hopefully for 2 weeks. So that's a big difference in that we don't purchase everything as fresh and available. There's an emphasis in our culture on convenience foods, such as fast foods and prepackaged foods. that is not there in Colombia. And then in the United States, individuals will drink more soda. However, in Colombia, soda is actually frowned upon, and consumption of it is extremely limited as it's not a healthy beverage. So just some perspectives that I have as a future nutrition professional. So recent research has actually shown that there's an increase in the prevalence of overweight and obesity in Colombian households, while there is a significant decrease in malnourishment of younger children. It's a good thing that there's a decrease in the malnourishment of younger children. That means that children and babies are getting the foods that they need to be healthy, and it's preventing any long-term issues that may come from being malnourished as a child. However, the increase in the prevalence of overweight and obesity is something that is occurring across Latin America. It's proposed that this is possibly due to an increase in the availability of processed foods that are being imported from other countries. This started to occur about 10-15 years ago when trade agreements were opened up with the United States, and so individuals have more access to processed foods as they're being imported. So this is one bad thing about trade agreements. However, the great thing is that malnourishment is decreasing. We just have to keep an eye on the increase in overweight and obesity. So some food selection concerns. Many Colombian dishes are actually pretty well balanced in terms of the macronutrients. However, most of them have some higher fat meats like beef, and higher fat cheeses. Cheese is a big food in Colombian culture. So one way to possibly, keep that in mind, we don't want individuals to stop eating the foods that they are used to, the traditional dishes that they are used to consuming on a daily basis. However, we could try to help them modify some of those traditional dishes so they include leaner meats or lower fat cheeses, so there's a little less concern in that area. There's some concern in terms of the low consumption of water and high consumption of caffeine and sugar-sweetened beverages. So while soda isn't a huge, a largely consumed beverage in Colombia, they do drink a lot of fruit juices or sugar-sweetened beverages, and they drink a lot of coffee, a lot of caffeine, while consuming a low amount of water. So trying to increase some of that water intake and possibly decrease some of the other ones. And they also have a high consumption of some sorts of sweets following meals on a daily basis. Some cultural components to consider. We've got gender roles. I would say that's probably one of the largest influences in Colombian culture. So we've got men who are seen as the head of household and breadwinners. And like in most Latin American cultures, machismo is seen. So basically having a strong sense of masculine pride and making sure that they are providing for their family and that they have the respect and obedience from their family members. Women tend to put their husband's needs and wishes ahead of their own. They care for the home and the children, including preparing most of the meals. So that's something to take into consideration when working possibly with a Colombian male or working with a Colombian female, what other influences might be there in terms of how the household goes. Traditionally, in previous years, there has been that women stay home on a daily basis. However, in more recent years, most families are actually, both parents are working to make sure they have enough support for the family. So you'll typically not see as much of this. There's a little bit more equality in terms for women, but they still take care of primarily most of everything going on in the household. And then for families, so families are very, very close. They often live together or very near to each other. This includes children, extended family, aunts and uncles, grandparents. So many family members are very involved in any health or medical concerns for individuals in the family. I know I have a friend that I work with who is Colombian, and she emigrated here with her mother when she was 9. Her mom doesn't speak English, so it's another issue right there you might have to consider for cultural language barriers. So she does a lot of the translating for most of her mom. She goes to most appointments with her. She's very involved in her mother's healthcare. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. Her mother just feels a little bit more comfortable with her daughter around, especially since she doesn't speak English. So it just helps the whole situation a little bit better. And thank you so much for listening to me. Here are my references. Hope you have a wonderful day.